Today, we are going to embark on an incredible journey through the United States of America. We will visit all 50 states and will discover their capitals, their flags, and their most impressive sights. And additionally, you will also learn important facts about American history, geography, demographics, and the economy. So, from New York to San Francisco, and from Florida to Alaska, welcome to the 50 states of the USA. Let's start our tour in the Northeast. Our first state is Maine, which has its capital in Augusta. The origin of its name is disputed, but it does have the same name as the county of Maine in France, giving a possible answer. The state has a rugged and rocky coastline and lush vegetation filled with signature northeastern forests, which have shaped its stunning landscapes. Throughout its geography, there are over 6,000 lakes and 5,000 islands, displaying impressive greenery. When in Maine, perhaps the most iconic part of the state is Acadia National Park, most beautiful in both summer and autumn. New Hampshire has its capital in Concord. Its name's origin is a bit more clear. It comes from the Hampshire County in England. The state, while not very populated, maintains some charm with cities that have older colonial appearance, such as Portsmouth or Exeter. If you've ever seen a stamp or the state quarter, or a highway sign of New Hampshire, you may have noticed this image, a jagged rock formation on Cannon Mountain known as the Old Man of the Mountain. The name, as you can tell, came from the shape that oddly resembles a bearded man. However, in 2003, due to the natural processes of erosion that affects all rocks on our planet, the old man fell from his home to the ground. Massachusetts has its capital in Boston. Etymologically, Massachusetts comes from the native tribe of the Massachusetts, who lived in the region. Boston is one of the oldest cities in the country, so naturally it is rich with history. Most famously, the Boston Tea Party took place here, which was an encounter in which English colonists disguised themselves as Native Americans and threw English tea into the water in protest against the high taxes imposed by the British. Massachusetts is also home to the famous Harvard University, and it was here where the infamous Salem witch trials took place, featuring my favorite witches, Winifred, Sarah, and Mary. And it would be sacrilegious to pass by Massachusetts without mentioning sports. Boston is home to the New England Patriots, the NFL team with the most Super Bowl wins, the Boston Celtics, one of the most historically successful basketball teams, and the Boston Red Sox, one of the most storied franchises in the MLB. Rhode Island has its capital in the city of Providence. Rhode Island is the smallest state in the Union, but it has a high population density as it is the second most densely populated state. Its name comes from an Italian navigator who named what is now Block Island as Rhode Island, because he found it to be very similar to the famous island of Rhodes, a Greek island in the Mediterranean Sea where you could once find one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Here in the United States, you won't find the Colossus of Rhodes, but you can stroll through the city of Bristol, which has charming 19th century houses lining the streets. Connecticut has its capital in Hartford. One of the most prestigious universities in the world, Yale, is found in this state. Its name comes from the Mohegan word Connecticut, which roughly translates to Long River Place. The Connecticut River runs through the state from north to south and is one of the longest rivers in the region. The state of New York doesn't have its capital city in its largest city, but rather in a small city of 100,000 inhabitants called Albany. However, the most famous city in the state is of course New York City, the city that never sleeps, the Big Apple, a megalopolis with over 22 million inhabitants. Besides being the largest city in the country, it is also one of the oldest cities in the United States. It was founded by the Dutch with the name New Amsterdam, but after it came under control of the British, its name was changed to New York after the English city of York. It quickly became an important city, playing a significant role during the War of Independence and becoming the cultural capital of the world in the 20th century. This city is home to iconic landmarks such as the Statue of Liberty, the Brooklyn Bridge, the Empire State Building, and Central Park. New Jersey has its capital in the city of Trenton. The state gets its name from the English island of Jersey. Just in front of Rhode Island, it is the most densely populated state in the country. Additionally, it has one of the most important ports and a powerful chemical industry. This state was the scene of significant battles during the American War of Independence, and, in fact, George Washington crossed the Delaware River to capture the city of Trenton. But besides all this, New Jersey and New York are famous for their incredibly long beaches, stretching for hundreds of miles. Although the water is very cold, so your most delicate parts might not enjoy it. Pennsylvania has its capital in the city of Harrisburg. The name of the state comes from William Penn, to whom the English king granted large lands in this area, and the ending Sylvania, which technically means wooded. Its most populous city is Philadelphia, the place where the famous Philadelphia cream cheese is made. Well, actually, that's a lie. I made that up. The cheese company was actually founded in New York. However, Philadelphia is an important city for the United States historically. Here, the Declaration of Independence was written, and the Constitution of the United States was drafted. In this state, there's also a town with a unique tradition each February which gives birth to Groundhog Day. Every year, the groundhog Puxatawny Phil is awakened to determine, based on its behavior, if winter will last for 6 more weeks or not. Who needs satellites and scientific data if you can just wake up a groundhog to predict the weather? Who would have thought? So far, we have seen the states of the Northeast region, one of the 4 major regions into which the geography of the United States is divided. It's often said that this region is the most European-like in the United States, as these are some of the more liberal states. Here, for example, rates of religious belief are lower, firearm ownership is more restricted, and the number of murders is also lower. The 3 other regions of the country are the South, the Midwest, and the West. All of them have distinct cultures and climates. Next up, we're going to head down south, and then we'll make our way to the others later. Delaware has its capital in Dover. The name of the state comes from the Delaware River, which originally derives from Governor Thomas West, who was titled Lord Delaware. Delaware is also famously nicknamed the First State, since it was indeed the first state to ratify the U.S. Constitution back in 1787. Right next to it is Maryland, with its capital in Annapolis. The name of the state comes from Queen Mary, the wife of English King Charles I. The state has some very peculiar borders. I mean, I need someone to explain to me why it's a straight line right here, but irregular and windy down there, and why it sticks so far inland. Like, what is this spot? But anyway, I digress. Undoubtedly, the most well-known city of the state is Baltimore, where the country's national anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner, was written. Virginia has its capital in Richmond. The name of the state is attributed to Queen Elizabeth I of England, who is also known as the Virgin Queen, as she never married or had any children. Jamestown, the first English settlement in North America, is located in this state. The city of Norfolk is home to vital shipyards where many of the United States Navy's vessels are built. It also houses the largest naval base in the world, where some of the most powerful aircraft carriers dock. North Carolina has its capital in Raleigh. The state boasts a wide variety of climates and landscapes, ranging from mild coastal areas to colder mountain regions. You can visit beautiful natural areas such as the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, which is the most visited national park in the United States. And south of North Carolina is South Carolina.
Bruh.
Its capital is Columbia. The origin of both states named Carolina comes from the English King Charles I, as their meaning would be something like the land of Charles. South Carolina has a temperate climate throughout the year and is known for significant cotton and tobacco crops. In the past, it was one of the states with the largest number of enslaved people working on plantations, and it was the first state to secede during the American Civil War. In this state, you can visit the historic city of Charleston with its beautiful buildings that are over a century old. The Congaree National Park is also located in the state, featuring a natural reserve in a wetland with lush forests. It is one of the swampy areas that are typical to the southeastern United States. Georgia has its capital in Atlanta. Its name comes from King George of England. Here, you'll find the city of Savannah, with a historic center that still retains a delightful historical charm. And in Atlanta, you'll find the busiest airport in the United States, Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. Georgia is another state where cotton, tobacco, and corn agriculture are essential. The Stone Mountain Park is a natural area featuring a massive granite dome that stands majestically around the surrounding landscape. This state also has a well-known accent called the Georgia drawl. And you can't leave the state without trying their delicious food, like peach cobbler, made from their famous Georgia peaches. The states we've seen so far were a part of the original 13 British colonies. Eventually, they declared independence in 1776 and formed the United States of America. And from there, the United States began expanding until reaching its current 50 states. Next is the District of Columbia, with the capital in the city of Washington, LS. Also known as Washington. Like and subscribe. Now, I know you're confused about this name, so let me explain. It's called this because George Washington clicked like and subscribed to the channel. Well, actually, that's a joke. But please, we're poor. Seriously, we need you to click like and subscribe so we can continue making informative videos like this. Now, seriously, this video has more than an hour of geographic knowledge full of data, interesting facts, and memes. I mean, what more could you want? So, if you're really enjoying the video, besides just hitting like and subscribing, you can also consider leaving a super thanks. Donations are essential to keeping the channel going. These videos are long and take a lot of time, research, and production to see the light, so any help is welcome. So if you do, thank you very much. Washington, D.C., District of Columbia, owes its name to Christopher Columbus, who is widely considered to be the first European to reach the Americas in the modern age, and to General George Washington, one of the leaders of the United States independence and its first president. It's a tiny federal district nestled between the Potomac River and Maryland. And, technically, it's not one of the 50 states, but rather a district whose citizens can't legally vote in the National Senate. Nowadays, there's a movement to have it recognized as the 51st state, which may be achieved in the coming years. In the city, you can visit the White House, the Lincoln Memorial, the impressive Smithsonian Museum, or the Washington Monument, a towering obelisk standing at 152 meters in height. According to some theories, it's actually part of a massive human sculpture that spans the center of the Earth, featuring the heads of Easter Island and the Stonehenge in England as the toes. Where the monument fits in here is, well, you can figure that one out on your own. Washington, D.C. is the territory with the highest per capita income in the entire United States, mainly due to the large number of government officials and highly skilled, well-paid workers involved in government-related activities. Additionally, due to its high population and small size, it has the highest population density among all entities. Now, you may have noticed we skipped a state when covering the Northeast, Vermont, which has its capital in the city of Montpelier. When the British colonies declared independence from Great Britain, Vermont was one of them, but didn't join the United States until 14 years later, so it wasn't one of the original 13 states. Through the state runs a mountain range called the Green Mountains. In French, green is vert, and mountain is mont. Put the two together, and you find Vermont, whose nickname, unsurprisingly, is the Green Mountain State. Along with its mountains come its famous forests. Vermont is well known for its natural maple syrup and its stunning range of colorful foliage in the autumn months. Now moving way back down south, we find Florida, which has its capital in the city of Tallahassee. Its name comes from the day of its discovery, Easter Sunday, or as it was called by Ponce de Leon, the Spanish navigator who landed there, Pascua Florida, which translates literally to flowered feast. Thanks to its warm and sunny climate, it is known as the Sunshine State, attracting a large number of retirees. It is also one of the states that receives the highest number of tourists. They go to visit its beaches or famous theme parks like Disney World or SeaWorld. The Kennedy Space Center is also located there, serving as the launch site for numerous rockets to outer space. And, of course, there are the Everglades, a national park with vast wetlands and home to the state's famous alligators. However, Florida is also famous for being hit by hurricanes almost every year due to its position at the end of Hurricane Alley. Alabama has its capital in the city of Montgomery. Its name comes from the Alabama River, the main river in the state, which, in turn, derives from the native Alabama tribe. Although it was eventually succeeded by Richmond, Montgomery was the first capital city of the Confederate States of America, the group of states that seceded from the United States, causing the American Civil War. For this reason, Alabama is often known as the heart of Dixie. The cultivation of products like cotton is a significant factor in this state, which is a big reason why it was one of the strongholds of slavery and segregation for much, much longer than most other states. Mississippi has its capital in Jackson. Its name comes from the Mississippi River, the longest river in the United States and North America, which the Native Americans called Mississippi. In fact, the Mississippi River can be considered the great treasure of the United States because it provides the country with enormous agricultural potential. The country has two major mountain systems, the Appalachian Mountains to the east and the Rocky Mountains to the west. The Mississippi River flows between them, receiving numerous tributaries. The Mississippi River Basin, with over 3 million square kilometers, encompasses approximately 1/3 of the country's area. The accumulation of sediments in the floodplain, along with abundant water supply, makes the banks of the Mississippi River a highly productive agricultural zone. This is especially evident in the state of Mississippi, which heavily relies on agriculture. However, despite finding itself at the mouth of the river that can be called the aorta of America, it is sadly the poorest state in the country. Tennessee has its capital in Nashville. The origin of the name Tennessee comes from a Native American tribe known as the Tanasi. But as you know how the English-speaking people are, they decided to complicate a name that was originally easy to write. In Tennessee, you'll find the other side of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, the most visited national park in the United States. This state is located in the Bible Belt, a region in the southeastern United States known for its deep religious beliefs, and where the majority religion is very conservative evangelical Christianity. To give you an idea of how deep, in Tennessee itself, a law was passed called the Butler Act, which prohibited the teaching of evolution in state-run schools. There was an incident in 1925 known as the Scopes Monkey Trial, a famous trial where a teacher was prosecuted and ultimately found guilty of teaching evolution in his class. Kentucky has its capital in Frankfort. The name of the state comes from the Kentucky River, and perhaps the greatest wonder of the state is Mammoth Cave National Park, a natural park with an extensive network of caves that stretches for hundreds of kilometers, making it the world's longest known cave system. This massive system of chambers has formed over millions of years as slightly acidic water seeped underground and dissolved the limestone deposits there, creating large cracks and passages deep underground. Although you might be thinking about something else famous from Kentucky, I don't like advertising brands here. But, Colonel Sanders, I'm poor. Give me some money and I'll advertise for you. Yeah, just kidding. Finding Kentucky on the map can be challenging, so here's a little trick for you. Let's take a look at the map. Up here is the chef's hat. Here is the chef's head. Here's the shirt. Here are the pants. These down here are the boots. This is the frying pan, and here you find Kentucky Fried Chicken. West Virginia has its capital in the city of Charleston. West Virginia was originally part of Virginia, but separated during the Civil War. This state was one of the major coal producers in the country, and as we can see on this map, the state is practically a gigantic coal deposit. The United States possesses a vast amount of coal, but to understand why, we need to understand its geology. About 300 million years ago, during a period known as the Carboniferous period, much of what is now the United States was submerged under shallow waters. Coal is formed from the accumulation of large amount of vegetation in swampy areas. As the trees died, they accumulated, forming thick layers that, once they got deep enough, gradually fossilized into coal. The waters around this rugged coast were shallow, with numerous swamps and mangroves, resulting in a significant amount of organic matter accumulation. Subsequently, tectonic plate movements caused the land to rise in the Appalachian Mountains, but the coal continued its fossilization process until it was discovered in the 19th century. But beyond the geology, West Virginia is worth visiting for the New River Gorge National Park, with its mountains, forests, deep gorges, and enormous steel bridge. Ohio has its capital in Columbus. The name Ohio comes from the Ohio River, which the Iroquois Native Americans called the Ohio. Ohio is located in the heart of the so-called Rust Belt, an area historically dominated by heavy industry and metallurgy, with large foundries and factories producing machinery, vehicles, and steel. This industry relied on raw materials such as coal and metals, extracted from the northern Appalachian region. However, in the last several decades, heavy industry declined in the area. Many factories, such as automobile companies, relocated to cheaper production zones like Mexico or different countries of Asia, leaving much of the infrastructure aging and crumbling. Hence, the rust in Rust Belt. Indiana has its capital in Indianapolis, which literally means the city of Indiana. Man, imagine how much easier this would be if all the states were named the same way. Alabamapolis, Ohiopolis, or Tennesseeopolis. That way, students studying the states and their capitals would be way less stressed. However, that's not the case, and you're just going to have to deal with it if you're in geography class. Sorry. Etymologically, Indiana means land of Indians. I'm noticing a pattern with the naming in this state. It's a predominantly rural state where corn production is essential. However, the most famous aspect of the state is undoubtedly the Indianapolis 500, the famous open-wheel race that has been held for over 100 years, since 1911. This race has witnessed the significant evolution of automobiles over the past century. Michigan has its capital in Lansing. The name Michigan comes from the Native American word Michigama, which means literally Great Lake. I wonder if it has anything to do with this lake. What's it called again? Oh, yeah, Lake Michigan. That makes sense. In Michigan, we can highlight the famous city of Detroit, the birthplace of automobile giants like Ford or General Motors. But, sadly, Detroit has become the famous face of urban decline across the Rust Belt. Once prosperous neighborhoods have fallen into disrepair, and the population of the city has been in steady decline since its peak in the 1950s. Wisconsin has its capital in Madison. The name comes from the Wisconsin River. In the city of Milwaukee, the legendary brand Harley-Davidson was founded. As you may have noticed, what we really like is emphasizing nature, so we must point out that Wisconsin dells are worth visiting. They are beautiful formations of limestone rock located along the Wisconsin River with awesome horizontal strata. This state borders 2 of the Great Lakes, which form the largest group of lakes in the world, containing 21% of all the freshwater on our planet. Illinois has its capital in Springfield. Well, not this Springfield, but another one. By the way, on this map, you can see all the towns named Springfield in the United States. As you can see, there are kind of a lot of them. However, in Illinois' Springfield, you can visit the house where Abraham Lincoln lived for 17 years, and also where he was buried. But the most famous city where the majority of the population lives is Chicago, known for its towering skyscrapers. Many Hollywood blockbusters have been filmed here, such as Christopher Nolan's Batman trilogy. And, have you ever heard about the raising of Chicago? In the 19th century, the city was quite literally raised up by a meter or two. But we don't have time to explain that story right now. If you are interested in knowing more about this and learning a lot of awesome information about American cities, you should watch the video we made about the most beautiful cities in the United States, and the link will be at the end of the video. Minnesota has its capital in St. Paul. The name of the state comes from the Minnesota River, which the Native Americans called Minnesota. The Minnesota River flows into the Mississippi, which also originates in this state and begins its long journey south until it reaches the Gulf of Mexico. But the river is not the only water this state is known for, as Minnesota is also known for its numerous lakes, earning it the nickname the Land of 10,000 Lakes. The lakes make it a great destination for summer vacations if you enjoy boating or being on the water. Iowa has its capital in Des Moines. The name derives from the Iowa tribe, a tribe who lived in this area. The state is located in the heart of the Corn Belt, the largest corn-producing region in the country. The Amana colonies are quite remarkable here. They are a group of towns founded in the 1850s by a religiously devout group of German migrants. The towns have remained virtually intact to this day. Taking a stroll through their streets transports you to a rural 19th century America, with its traditional wooden constructions. If you find it strange that German folks migrated all the way out to the Great Plains, you should know that, actually, most of white Americans don't have English ancestry, but rather German. The English mainly emigrated during the time of the 13 colonies and settled on the East Coast. However, when the United States expanded westward during the 19th century, several million Germans immigrated and settled primarily in the new lands further west. Missouri has its capital in Jefferson City. The name derives from the Missouria tribe, who lived in this region. Mark Twain, the famous 19th century author, spent part of his childhood in the town of Hannibal, where a museum house can be visited. It is also worth visiting St. Louis, with its spectacular arch, which can be visited for breathtaking views. Additionally, the Ozark National Forest is worth exploring, offering impressive panoramic views, geological formations, and the opportunity to see a wide variety of wildlife, including deer, black bears, and a wide range of bird species. Arkansas has its capital in Little Rock. Its name derives from the word Kensaw, which was how other Native Americans referred to the Quapaw tribe which lived there. Arkansas was the site of the Little Rock Crisis in 1957. After the Civil War, slavery was abolished, but discrimination against African Americans persisted through laws that prevented them from voting, attending schools with white students, and many other shameful regulations. The southern states, which had a significant African American population and a strong religious sentiment, had the harshest laws against African Americans. In 1954, it was ruled that racial segregation in schools was illegal, and segregated schools had to be eliminated. There were protests against integration in many educational institutions. But when the first 9 black students arrived at Little Rock Central High School, significant turmoil ensued. The National Guard had to be deployed to maintain order. But under the pretext of quote-unquote preserving peace, instead of ensuring their entry into the school, the guards prevented them from entering instead. Eventually, the President of the United States had to intervene. And, finally, under the orders of the President, the National Guard allowed the children to attend the school, ensuring their right to education. Today, in the United States, all racial laws have been eliminated, but their consequences are still evident. The national poverty rate averages at around 11%, but while it drops to 8% among white individuals, it reaches nearly 24% among Native Americans and nearly 20% among African Americans. This and much other data shows that there's still much work to be done on this front. Louisiana has its capital in Baton Rouge, a city with a surprising French name. The state's name derives from the French king Louis XIV. Historically, the region west of the Mississippi River was known as Louisiana, an area that was explored by the Spanish and the French, but ultimately became a French colony. For 40 years, France ceded Louisiana to Spain, marking a peak moment of Spanish control over North America. However, it was eventually returned to France in 1803, and, shortly after, the United States, which had already been expanding westward, purchased it from France, doubling its total territory. The most famous city in the state is without a doubt New Orleans, a city with delightful colonial charm. New Orleans is also known as the birthplace of jazz. The city has been a center of African American culture since the era of slavery, and jazz emerged in the early 20th century as a fusion of different musical styles, including blues, ragtime, and brass band music. Throughout its history, New Orleans has experienced floods due to its location in a river delta and its low elevation compared to sea level. The city is particularly vulnerable to flooding because of its location on the Gulf of Mexico, where hurricanes and tropical storms can cause severe inundation of water. The most notable flooding event in New Orleans was without a doubt Hurricane Katrina in 2005. The storm caused massive damage and left much of the city underwater. But we cannot leave Louisiana without mentioning another one of its great gems, Cajun cuisine, which is totally delicious. Moving way back up north, we find North Dakota, which has its capital in the city of Bismarck. The word Dakota comes from the Dakota tribe, which inhabited this region. The colonization of this area was primarily driven by hunting and fur trading. A testament to this era is the Fort Union Trading Post, a reconstruction of a 19th century trading fort. French Louisiana was a very different colony from the 13 British colonies. The territory was much larger and fewer French immigrants settled there, resulting in a more cordial and respectful relationship between Europeans and Native Americans, primarily based around the fur trade. European traders traveled up the Mississippi River and purchased furs from trappers, which they then sold in European markets. And you might be surprised by the name of the next state, because south of North Dakota is... South Dakota.
Bruh.
The capital of South Dakota is Pierre, and in South Dakota you can find Mount Rushmore, the impressive sculptural ensemble created in the early 20th century in the Black Hills, carved into the rock. The faces depicted are those of 4 beloved American presidents: George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Theodore Roosevelt, and Abraham Lincoln. Another marvelous place in South Dakota is Badlands National Park, with its beautiful and multicolored canyons and clay formations. Nebraska has its capital in Lincoln. The name comes from the Platte River, which the Native Americans called Nebraska. In Nebraska, you can find mythical landscapes of the western frontier, with vast prairies and barren lands like those in Scotts Bluff National Monument, featuring impressive sedimentary rock formations. For thousands of years, large herds of bison grazed on these prairies. Bison were an essential part of the diet of the Native American people in the area. These magnificent animals lived in massive herds that migrated from north to south, seeking the best pastures. However, with the westward expansion of the United States, after the use of firearms to hunt them in their enclosure and ranches, their numbers dramatically declined. Nowadays, they survive only in small pockets. But my favorite place in Nebraska is this site. It's called Carhenge, a very kitschy recreation of England's Stonehenge made with old cars. Well, I don't think it's worth traveling thousands of miles to visit, but there have been people who went there just to get married.
Bruh.
If you thought the capital of our next state, Kansas, is Kansas City, sadly, you're mistaken. It's actually Topeka. Kansas gets a little confusing like that. You don't want to confuse Kansas with Arkansas, spelled the same way but pronounced differently. And Kansas City is not only in Kansas. It's divided by the border with Missouri, so there's Kansas City, Kansas, and Kansas City, Missouri. And in fact, the main center of the city is on the Missouri side, so most of the time when you talk about Kansas City, you're actually talking about Missouri. And, to top it off, neither of them is the capital of their respective states. Isn't geography just the best? Kansas is the geographic and geodetic center of the United States. However, it's a region of great contrasts. The east is humid and rainy, covered in oak forests and vast agricultural fields, while the west is much drier, with only grasses growing and crops requiring irrigation. If we look at this map of climates in the United States, we can see a significant climatic division in this zone from north to south. On the right, we find more humid climates, such as humid subtropical or humid continental, while on the left, we have cold semi-arid climate. Just by observing a satellite image, it's evident that the western part of the country is much drier, with earthy colors, compared to the intense green of the east. In fact, Kansas was greatly affected by the Dust Bowl, a period of intense soil erosion and drought that affected the Great Plains region throughout the United States, including the central and western parts of Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, Colorado, and Kansas during the 1930s. It was caused by a combination of adverse weather conditions and improper agricultural practices, including overexploitation of land for farming. Drought and soil erosion led to massive dust storms. Farmland dried up, and agricultural production plummeted, resulting in crop losses and the mass migration of farmers and their families to other regions in search of work and better living conditions. Oklahoma has its capital in Oklahoma City. That one is much easier than Kansas. Etymologically, the name comes from the native term Oklahoma, which means red people. Actually, if we look at the racial map, we can confirm that Oklahoma is one of the states with the highest number of Native Americans. It has a historical origin in the dramatic events that occurred in North America between the 18th and 19th centuries. As we have seen before, the coastal regions of North America are much more humid and suitable for agriculture than the Central Plains. When the English settlers arrived, most of the Native American tribes lived in the east, while the population density in the Central Plains was much lower. However, today, the situation is the opposite. The colonizers expelled the natives from the coasts and, unfortunately, exterminated those who refused to leave. As early as the 18th century, it caused tremendous conflicts between the British Crown, which advocated for respecting the natives, and the colonizers, who favored their expulsion or killing. When the United States gained independence and expanded westward, the natives were repeatedly expelled, being sent further and further west to the dry and inhospitable lands. Finally, in 1830, President Jackson signed the Indian Removal Act, a law that forced the remaining natives in the United States to migrate westward, mainly to the land of the Red People, Oklahoma, where they were promised they could live. This deportation, making them walk on foot for thousands of miles, with scarce food and sleeping during nights in the open air, caused the death of thousands of natives. This journey is known as the infamous Trail of Tears. As a result of the inhumane conditions, their population reduced to extremely low numbers, and nowadays there's hardly any native population remaining in the east. Texas has its capital in Austin. Its name comes from Spanish, although its etymological origin is not entirely clear. It may be due to the fact that the settlers called a local tribe Tejas, or because the abundance of yew trees in the mountainous areas called Tejos in Spanish. The pronunciation in Spanish would be Tejas, while in English it's Texas. Texas is the second largest state in the country and is known as the State of Six Flags because throughout its history, it has belonged to 6 different countries. It was initially colonized by Spain, briefly became a part of France before returning back to Spanish hands. It later became a part of Mexico because, yes, my friends, after Mexico gained independence, it had this enormous size. Then, Texas declared its independence to form the Republic of Texas, which was later absorbed by the United States and also became a part of the Confederate States. Texas is a state with a rich and complex history. If Texas were a country, it would be the 8th largest economy on the planet, in between France and Canada. These astonishing numbers are achieved thanks to its large population, but also because it's one of the leading states in research, particularly in the medical and technological sectors. Additionally, Texas has enormous reserves of oil and gas, which help drive its economy. Texas extracts over 40% of the oil in all of the United States. As we can see on this map, a significant portion of its surface has oil or natural gas beneath it. The United States is fortunate in many ways, but especially in terms of energy, as it possesses immense energy reserves distributed across its geography. Moving on to climatological aspects, Texas is the state with the highest number of tornadoes. It is located in the so-called Tornado Alley, the region of the country where the majority of tornadoes occur. But, despite the risks, they still have the custom of building houses out of wood instead of brick houses in this area, and, well, then things happen. New Mexico has its capital in Santa Fe. The name derives from the belief, held by Spanish colonizers, that there was another powerful empire to the north, which they called Nuevo Mexico. However, this belief was never proven to be true because the entire western part of the United States, mountainous, arid, and unsuitable for living, was always sparsely populated. This state has a rugged beauty. It is a desert state shaped by erosion. We'd like to highlight the White Sands National Park with its incredibly beautiful white sands, or the Carlsbad Caverns with its deep galleries and stunning karst formations. Colorado has its capital in Denver. Its name comes from the Spanish explorers who named the river Colorado due to the reddish tone of its waters, which carry a significant amount of mud. Here, we can find Rocky Mountain National Park, known for its breathtaking natural landscapes that include mountains, valleys, rivers, lakes, as well as vast areas of forests and meadows. A large part of the state is covered by the Rocky Mountains, which extend from north to south, from Canada all the way to Mexico. However, the reality is that the Rockies are just part of an enormous series of mountain ranges that stretch along the entire Americas, from Alaska to Chile. This astonishing length is due to the collision of the tectonic plates of the Pacific Ocean with the American plates. The collision of these plates causes massive mountain chain to rise from north to south, as well as the formation of volcanoes and earthquakes. Wyoming has its capital in Cheyenne. The name comes from the Wyoming Valley all the way over in Pennsylvania. If you're confused why that might be, during the American Revolution, a battle happened in the Wyoming Valley, and they wanted to honor it with the name of this new territory. As mentioned before, along the collision zone of tectonic plates, volcanoes are formed. And precisely here is one of the great volcanic areas of the United States, Yellowstone National Park. In summary, Yellowstone National Park is an impressive place with a unique combination of volcanism and natural beauty. A large portion of the park is part of a massive 70 by 45 kilometer volcanic caldera, a true supervolcano that remains dormant. The volcanism in Yellowstone is caused by enormous underground magma chamber, located approximately 8 to 10 kilometers below the surface. Magma heats the groundwater, creating geysers, hot springs, and causing earthquakes and landslides. The exuberant nature of the park, with vast forests and numerous animal and plant species, remains oblivious to what happens just beneath the surface. But Yellowstone is a geologically active area, and the day will come when it erupts. When it will happen is impossible to predict, but on that day, lava will flow through its valleys as it did thousands of years ago. Montana has its capital in Helena. The name derives from the Spanish term Montaña del Norte, Mountain of the North, which is how the Castilian explorers named this region. The most famous event that took place in the state was the Battle of Little Bighorn, also known as Custer's Last Stand, which occurred in 1876. It was a clash between the forces of the United States Army, led by General Custer, and a coalition of Native American tribes, including the Sioux and Cheyenne tribes. As the United States continued to expand westward, the Native American tribes that traditionally inhabited the region resisted these efforts and sought to maintain their lands in traditional ways. In the Battle of Little Bighorn, the United States Army forces, including Custer's famous 7th Cavalry, were swiftly defeated by the Native American tribes. However, this defeat was short-lived, as the United States eventually prevailed and managed to expand all the way to the Pacific Ocean. The most impressive place in Montana is without a doubt Glacier National Park, which offers heart-stopping views. The rugged terrain of the park has been carved over millennia by the large glaciers that once covered it, breaking through the rock and creating deep glacial valleys. Nowadays, only few glaciers remain, and climate change is slowly melting them away. But the views of this wild and pristine nature are still precious. Idaho has its capital in Boise. It is another rugged state nestled in the Rocky Mountains, but it is crossed by the Snake River Valley with a gentle terrain, abundant water, and mild temperatures, making it perfect for agriculture. Most crops stretching for hundreds of kilometers in Idaho are potatoes. Take a look at this map of potato production and check out how it coincides almost exactly with the impressive curve made by the Snake River. And these tubers can not only be delicious, but also adorable. Who's my favorite potato? Who is it? Aw, can I take a bite? But in Idaho, it is also worth highlighting the Craters of the Moon National Monument and Preserve, a volcanic area formed by a series of violent volcanic eruptions that left behind a vast amount of lava, in a lunar-like landscape known as the Lava Field. Visitors can explore the craters and volcanic features, which have a harsh and arid appearance, as they have been scarcely colonized by any vegetation at all. Utah has its capital in Salt Lake City, a city named after the Great Salt Lake located nearby, a lake with salinity similar to that of the ocean. The rivers that flow into the Great Salt Lake carry fresh water, like all rivers on the planet, but the lake is very salty due to the particular terrain of the area. Most rivers eventually flow into the ocean, known as exorheic rivers, with the prefix exo meaning outside, as they flow outside of the continental masses. However, on the planet, especially in areas enclosed by mountains, there are endorheic basins, with the prefix endo meaning inside, which include rivers that do not manage to reach the sea. In this map, we can see in the blue the major endorheic basins on the planet, including areas like the Dead Sea, the Caspian Sea, the Salar de Uyuni, or the Great Salt Lake. What happens in this area is that the hydrographic basin is enclosed between the Rocky Mountains on one side and the Sierra Nevada on the other, preventing the rivers from flowing into the ocean. All of the water ends up in the Great Salt Lake, and the sediment contributions from the rivers over thousands of years have made it increasingly salty. The reason the lake doesn't grow immense and overflow is that it is located in a very warm region with high evaporation rates. So, eventually, a balance is reached between the water supplied by the rivers and the water that evaporates. However, excessive water use for agriculture is putting the delicate balance of the lake at risk. In recent decades, as water consumption has increased, the surface area of the lake has been shrinking. It could end up experiencing a fate similar to other endorheic lakes, such as the Aral Sea, which has practically disappeared and is now an inert desert. In the rugged land of Utah, you can find some of the most iconic national parks in the country, full to the brim with natural wonders. One such park is Arches National Park, with impressive natural arches, as well as the stunning desert landscapes. And, of course, Canyonlands National Park, an awe-inspiring natural area known for its canyons, mesas, and rock formations carved by the waters of the Colorado and Green Rivers. The Island in the Sky region is a mountainous and forested area that offers spectacular views of the canyon and the river. The Needles region is known for its rock formations sculpted by wind and water. And the Maze region is a remote and wild area that resembles a gigantic maze. I can assure you that Utah is impressive. Furthermore, Utah is a part of the so-called Mormon Belt, as the majority of members of this faith live in this area. It was precisely in this state where the Golden Spike was driven, the final spike of the Transcontinental Railroad that, in 1869, finally connected the West Coast with the rest of the U.S. railway network for the first time. Arizona has its capital in Phoenix. There are two theories about the origin of the state's name. One theory suggests that it may come from the native term Arizona, which is how the indigenous people referred to the area around a Spanish mining camp, and from there, it came to be applied to the entire region. Another theory is that it derives from the Basque phrase Arizona, the good oak, as there was a community of Basque shepherds in the area. Either way, the Spanish referred to the area as Arizona, and it evolved to its current spelling. So, for those who have read somewhere that Arizona comes from the term zona arida, arid zone, I regret to inform you that you have been lied to. In Arizona, most famously, you will find Grand Canyon National Park, where the Colorado River has carved the steepest and deepest gorges, reaching up to a 2,000-meter difference between its highest and lowest points. Its rocks are so ancient that the lower layers have been dated to be 1.6 billion years old. Its slopes are a true open book of Earth's geological history, displaying the changes that have occurred from the Precambrian era to the present day. Another impressive place is Monument Valley, where enormous limestone buttes withstand the passage of time. These huge layers of limestone rock were formed about 100 million years ago, when the Midwest was covered by an inland sea. Under these conditions, rivers carried large amounts of sediments, which accumulated and compacted into sedimentary rocks. Later, due to the collision of tectonic plates, the area rose, and elements such as wind and water gradually eroded the thick layers of sediments, turning the rock into dust. The day will come, millions of years from now, when the elements have eroded these great stone structures, and everything will end up being a vast plain. California has its capital in Sacramento, although its most famous cities are San Francisco and Los Angeles. California is a word of Spanish origin that first appeared in a novel in 1510, featuring a fictional island called California. Later, explorers ended up naming these lands after that fictional island. Hopefully, someday we'll do the same thing on Mars, and astronauts will name a place on Mars after Narnia or Hobbiton. California is the third largest state, but it is also the most populous, with a population similar to that of Spain or Argentina. Furthermore, California is a very wealthy state. If it were an independent country, it would rank 7th in the world in terms of GDP, close to countries like France or even India. This prosperity is not only due to natural resources, of which it has many, but especially in thanks to technology. Silicon Valley is located here, and it is the place where technology giants like Apple, Google, or HP have their headquarters. In California, there are legendary places like San Francisco, with its famous steep hills, Alcatraz Island, Chinatown, or the Golden Gate Bridge. But despite its beauty, San Francisco, and in fact all of California, is in a very dangerous zone. As we mentioned before, all the American tectonic plates are colliding with the Pacific plates. Throughout the state, the San Andreas Fault runs, and the slow movement of tectonic plates can be observed. This friction between the movement of the plates causes small earthquakes, which are quite frequent in the area. However, sometimes these earthquakes aren't small. The last major earthquake occurred in 1906 when San Francisco was shaken by a massive tremor that toppled numerous buildings and sparked a fire that ravaged the entire city. Although the city was rebuilt and now looks spectacular, scientists warn that major earthquakes happen cyclically, and at any moment, the big one could occur. A huge quake that could have devastating consequences. Another essential place in California is Los Angeles, which is not particularly beautiful, but it also has iconic locations like the Griffith Observatory, the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and the famous sign on the Springfield Hill. No, not that one. This one. And of course, there are the Santa Monica beaches. The legendary Los Angeles Lakers basketball team is also found here, and it's historically the most successful basketball team in the NBA. Many cities in this state have Spanish toponyms because they were found during the time of the Spanish Empire. Although the area remained sparsely populated due to its remoteness and aridity, which made it challenging for the limited technology of the time, Spain's control was quite precarious. The European population was very small, and their presence mainly involved Christianizing and trading with the natives without significantly influencing their lives. All of this changed when, after the independence of Mexico, the United States took over California, and in 1848, gold was discovered, unleashing the California Gold Rush. From then on, thousands of American settlers moved westward and began to settle along the coasts, forever changing the region's morphology. If you want to see some nature, we can visit Death Valley, an arid valley where the highest temperature on Earth has been recorded, a scorching 56.7 degrees Celsius or 131 degrees Fahrenheit. In the desert, we also find Joshua Tree National Park, known for its impressive rock formations and characteristic Joshua trees. There's also, of course, Yosemite National Park, with its massive and imposing granite formations. And then, in the north, there's Redwood National Park, a national park that protects one of the largest expanses of giant sequoia forests in the world. These trees offer an awe-inspiring experience for visitors, as they are among the oldest and largest living organisms on Earth. The General Sherman is the oldest sequoia in the park, estimated to be between 2,400 and 2,700 years old. And when I say these trees are very large, I mean very large. Nevada has its capital in Carson City. Despite being a desert state, its name does, in fact, mean snow-covered in Spanish. Specifically, it refers to the Sierra Nevada mountain range, whose peaks can be snow-covered in the winter. This mountain range makes up the western border of Nevada with California. Although the climate is very hot and dry in summer, it's also very cold in winter. Like the Mexican highlands further south, it is an area with extreme weather conditions. In Nevada, we find the city of Las Vegas, but we're not going to talk about it too much because this channel doesn't support gambling addiction. Nobody actually gets rich by playing at the casino, although many folks lose all their saving and ruin their family's well-being. And speaking of people who don't have any money, please help us get out of poverty by liking and subscribing to the channel. Seriously, it helps a lot. I'm very poor. Also in Nevada, we find the legendary Hoover Dam, one of the most iconic dams of the United States. And, of course, the mysterious Area 51. Since its creation in the 1950s, it has been the subject of much speculation and conspiracy. Area 51 is believed to be a center for research and development of advanced technologies, including aircraft and weapon systems. However, due to the secretive nature of the base and the lack of official information available, there are many unconfirmed theories about what really happens there. Some of the most popular theories include the existence of UFOs and extraterrestrials, testing of secret weapons, and experiments with advanced technologies like anti-gravity systems. However, these theories are highly speculative and really not supported by any concrete evidence, so don't go too crazy with them. Oregon has its capital in the city of Salem. The name likely derives from the Spanish region of Aragon, as it was explored by Spanish adventurers back in the day. In this state, we can highlight its dense and lush forests, where responsible forestry activities take place. As we can see in these grids, not the entire forest is logged, but selected areas are chosen and time is given for the previously logged areas to regenerate. It allows for sustainable forestry without depleting natural resources. But we won't finish with Oregon without mentioning the impressive Crater Lake National Park, which is the result of an extinct volcano that collapsed approximately 7,700 years ago, creating a caldera. The hole, filled with rain and snowmelt, and over the course of time, became a lake. The lake's water is crystal clear and intensely blue. It's a must-see place in Oregon. The state of Washington has its capital in Olympia. Its name comes from, well, okay, let you guess. I'll give you 5 seconds to think about it. Alright, time's up. If you guessed George Washington, the first president of the United States, you are correct. Those Americans, they just love doing that. Washington also has vast coniferous forests covering its mountainous areas. It also has several volcanoes with breathtaking beauty. Their gentle slopes are covered in beautiful forests and their summits are draped in pristine snow, But we can't forget that Washington is the second largest producer of potatoes, cultivated in the area where the Snake River enters the state. I don't know about you, but I personally would create a joint state, taking bits of Washington and bits of Idaho and calling it Potato Land, with its capital in the city of Potatopolis, and this would be its flag. Doesn't that sound cool? Anyway, moving on. Alaska has its capital in the city of Juneau. The name comes from the native term Alyeska, or Alaksak, which means Great Land. It is the largest state in the country by a wide margin, but has a very small population, making it by far the least densely populated state. The southern coast was explored and claimed by Spain, but the reality is that Spain could never effectively occupy it because it was way too remote. However, the Russian Empire managed to establish control by constructing forts and small settlements. You see, for Russia, all they had to do was cross the Bering Strait, unlike Spain, which had to go all the way around here. Much easier for Russia. The number of Europeans was very limited, and in the late 19th century, the United States purchased the peninsula from Russia. Good news came shortly after when gold was discovered, sparking another gold rush that led thousands of American settlers to migrate to these lands. The late colonization prevented shameful deportations like those carried out in the South, so there was no significant loss of native lives. This, combined with low immigration, has made Alaska the state with the highest percentage of native population, nearly 16%. These numbers, even though they seem low at first, are high compared to other states, but low compared to many Latin American countries. Additionally, Alaska showcases breathtaking nature, dense forests, Arctic landscapes, and towering peaks. Bears, moose, caribou, reindeer, bald eagles, seals, sea lions, all of these magnificent giant beasts. And then there are adorable little sea otters as well. Aw, look at them. Mount Denali, imposing and permanently covered in snow, is not only the highest peak in the United States, but also in all of North America. This majestic mountain, located near the North Pole, is extremely cold and very challenging to climb. It poses a true challenge for even the most experienced climbers. And finally, the last state in the Union is Hawaii, with its capital in Honolulu. Historically, the Hawaiian archipelago, nestled right in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, had no connection to North America at all. In fact, it was inhabited by people of Polynesian origin who had first arrived on these lands from other Pacific islands. However, in the late 19th century, when the Kingdom of Hawaii was going through a severe internal crisis, the United States took advantage and annexed it, gaining control over a strategic archipelago that was fundamental to dominating the Pacific Ocean. The Americans established the naval base of Pearl Harbor, which was heavily attacked by Japan during World War II, as the U.S. Pacific Fleet was stationed there. Hawaii consists of an arc of islands, with the western ones being larger and more modern, and the eastern ones being older and a bit smaller. This is because their origin lies in a mantle plume, otherwise known as a hot spot. All the islands are large volcanoes that have emerged from the depths of the Atlantic Ocean, and as the tectonic plate moves, sliding over this hotspot, new islands are born in alignment with the older ones. In fact, the older islands have a few volcanoes left. But volcanic activity is usually concentrated in the newer ones, such as the island of Hawaii, which boasts beautiful volcanic landscapes. Its massive volcanoes are covered in dense and lush vegetation. And, periodically, nature reminds us that we are still on islands that are geologically very, very active. And so, there you have it, all 50 of the United States of America. You're probably thinking, oh, well, this must be the end of the video. If you're thinking that, you are wrong. Because we have covered all of the states of the United States, but this country has expanded even further. In the late 19th century, amidst the imperialist fervor of the time, the United States declared war on Spain to seize Cuba, the Philippines, and Puerto Rico. While the Philippines and Cuba eventually gained their own independence, Puerto Rico remains part of the United States to this day and is considered a free associated state. Technically, Puerto Rico is not a country, nor is it a regular state in the Union. Its residents cannot send congressmen or senators to Washington, meaning it's part of the United States, but its inhabitants don't have the same political rights as other Americans do. Many denounce this situation as a form of colonial domination. In fact, Puerto Rico is the poorest territory of the United States, even poorer than Mississippi. However, Puerto Rico is a marvelous island with an enviable tropical climate, dense forests, and beautiful beaches with pristine white sand. Moreover, being an island with such a rich history, including 400 years of Spanish rule, it has charming historical sites, such as Old San Juan, the city of Ponce, and the Castillo San Felipe de Morro. San Juan, the capital, can be considered one of the most beautiful cities of the United States. Again, I invite you to watch the video of the most beautiful cities of the United States, which you can find on this channel. We'll post the link at the end of the video. And lastly, as a result of the expansion in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the United States also possesses a large number of sparsely inhabited small islands, such as the Virgin Islands, Wake Island, and Guam. These islands, although small and seemingly of little value, actually hold tremendous geostrategic importance. They serve as unsinkable aircraft carriers positioned around the world. With this, we conclude this comprehensive overview of the geography of the United States. Please, look at the time on this video. Take into consideration how difficult and time-consuming it is making a video as long as this one. We have to write, record, find the video clips, edit, put it all together. It takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. So, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and click on the notification bell, because all of these actions greatly help the channel and enable us to continue making these videos. And as I mentioned before early in the video, you can even think of leaving a donation in the form of a super thanks. If you do, thank you. It is so crucial for the channel, and we really appreciate it. If you want to learn more, feel free to check out other videos on our channel. We have lots of videos on geography, geology, and history. So after this video, if you're still in the mood to keep learning, we got you covered. So, thank you for watching all the way till the end. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.